LOC, man, hope y'all are having a good, what is it, Wednesday? Having a good Wednesday morning. And it's kind of funny. I was trying to think about where everybody lived in the league, and I still, up to this point, have no idea. But we have gotten to the point of the league starting. Games have been played, and figured we'd get a quick show in. As we get started into this new cycle. So, what's going on, LOC? Welcome back to the, I'm going to start calling it the Mookie Show. NCAA 27 is here. Conferences are set. Users have teams, and we are officially starting in the dynasty. Got a few things to cover today. We're going to talk about the slight delay to start the league, why these conferences should produce one of our most balanced seasons to start. 12 teams that Legend put out far as playoff predictions, some huge opening upsets, and yes, somebody is going to get directly called out that has tried to stay under the radar, running wild. And then we'll just end with a debate that could maybe get interesting. Are macros actually good for EA college football? So, and not just college football, it's going to be in Madden as well. So, first, just kind of wanted to address the league delay. It's pretty simple. First, we had to address a few things, kind of the elephant in the room, and that was this game has changed. And so, once the game changes, obviously that impacts how we start. Trying to figure out how things should be set up. But a simple answer is just simply admin schedules. My schedule was off. As far as when the family was going on PTO, we usually take a trip around July. Made that trip a little bit later this year. Obviously, Legend being busy with work, some changes within our BOD, and we usually kind of have a big phone call or try to connect before league starts, and we just simply hadn't had the time, and so we just kind of jumped straight into it. I know anybody that's an admin for any other league knows when you're running a dynasty with 32 users and you're trying to get schedules finalized, conferences, rules to make sure everybody understands. Which, letting y'all know, there may potentially be a change that does come. That is to again, we're trying to wait on that, but we'll see. So there's just some responsibilities. Obviously, you got real life responsibilities out of the game. Trying to make sure me and myself, Legend, and of course we still have Austin on the team, to make sure from a scheduling standpoint and just from a structuring standpoint that everything pretty much aligns. And so this was not our preference. It was not our preference to rush into league play, or at least kind of jumping into it without having a true game plan. We really do prefer to jump into this and communicate with you guys prior. But we always know that once the league gets started and once we hit that button, obviously it's going to be go time. As you can see, at this point, the current top 25, for the majority of teams, it looks like the majority of teams are currently being held by the league up to this point, which is what we expected with this new setup. Based on how the conferences are set up. For guys that weren't in the league for the first cycle, this is a pretty similar setup to what we had in the first cycle. Obviously, you can see who's sitting at the top of undefeated teams. This will obviously change come advance. I did get some messages from a few guys asking about, why the conferences were set up the way they are. And to be quite frank with you, one of the biggest goals going into the cycle was not just competitive balance from, you know, last cycle was really kind of based around skill and team. You had a great team and you had great skill. It made no sense to put you in a lower conference. It just didn't make sense. I'd probably argue that most commissioners would agree with that. That starting yourself into a league that doesn't have the correct balance with the dynasty points, with prestige. There's just a lot of things that you have to factor in. Um, we didn't want one conference loaded with every powerhouse while another conference had an easy road to the playoffs. I know that was kind of a big issue for people last cycle, so just try to do our best to address that. The conferences were built to kind of give a mixture of elite teams, good teams capable of beating anybody, and sleeper teams that can become dangerous in the hands of the right user. I mean, hell, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Young right now is 1-1 with Virginia Tech, and from what I've heard, he's doing pretty decent on the recruiting side as well. The reason all that's important because obviously within the user dynasty ratings only tell a part of a story. A 90 overall team doesn't guarantee you anything. We've already seen some of that. You got user skill that matters over time, recruiting that matters over time, play calling, etc. And sometimes the dudes controlling those three-star programs, like myself, and I had Wisconsin last year, and how I'm about to do the same thing with South Carolina. Uh, we have the ability to bring teams up. Now, every user is not built for that grind, so I understand people that may jump out of a league pretty much immediately because of that bad team situation. Um, but I don't think there's any situation that's an automatic win, at least in the start of the season. And I think we've already gotten a taste of that with just how unpredictable this game has been and some of the outcomes. So we'll see kind of how this plays out as far as conferences, and hopefully, at least everybody appreciates it and understands it. It's going to be interesting trying to figure out how to reset conferences over time, because again, with how this game does with dynasty points and all those things, you I got to be very careful changing people's situations because you don't want to impact anybody's money. So that's pretty much kind of the breakdown there on the balance of the league. And I did want to go ahead. Legend decided to make a prediction, an early predictions for playoffs. I'm going to call it the way too early list. That's what I'm gonna start calling it, the way too early. And but what I did was I took a little time and thought about it, like just from his list, and figured I'd give a breakdown based on how had it set up. So this is kind of just my opinion. If the playoffs started based on preseason expectations, I think based on these 12 teams, this is my thoughts. One, Oregon. One, obviously a good user. I get why Oregon gets the number one spot. They've got speed, talent, enough weapons to create matchup problems everywhere. The question isn't whether Oregon has a championship roster, because they do. It really comes down to the user and how does he elevate and stay locked in with Oregon the entire time. I'm assuming based off the list that this is Legends 1 through 12, so I kind of did the same thing here. Texas, obviously, that's Colton playing with Texas. I think we all have an idea of how Colton wants to play. Um, in my opinion, Texas may be one of the most complete teams on the game. Maybe not the most complete to start with. You probably have to still give that to Ohio State. But I do think if Colton avoids turnovers and just plays consistently like he does, I expect him to be around the championship picture. I can see things getting serious for him as far as the playoffs are concerned. Ohio State. Steve has Ohio State. I think that's going to be a pretty interesting situation for him when it gets into the playoffs. I'm not completely sold on Steve in that spot just yet, just because of how tight that conference is. But very similar situation, talent everywhere. I do think when you play with those strong teams, you kind of have been making that decision of being dependent of that team's roster, or kind of just leaning on skill. So not shocking that he has Steve up here in that 3 spot. Michigan has Blaze, and I think Michigan is a perfect situation for Blaze. Michigan is just built for dynasty football: run the ball, control the clock, play defense. Up to this point, Blaze already has a game where he shut out a user 28-0. I think that was Miami. Hey, Alo Jones, you sir, I don't know what your AD expectations are. You better get it together if you have no idea how this game is going to play out going into next season. But which is crazy, because right after that, Legend has Miami, and that's probably the one pick I struggle with is Alo being at 5, and they have the athletes to beat anybody. They have the defensive pieces. I think they still have defensive ends on Miami, but I don't know. We've already seen something interesting because they lost to UCLA, and then they had a shutout, if I'm not mistaken, where they lost to Michigan. I think the game was 28-0 there. The next one was LSU, and again, another team that I think is just capable. I think that LSU user is 1-1 right now. Obviously, the season is still pretty early. This is why I think it's a way too early list. Um, but I get why he's putting certain users where they sit. A lot of these users, from a skills standpoint and team situation, are capable of being dominant. Number 7, Oklahoma, obviously with Mark. I'm not sure why. I'm not. I don't know. I I actually personally have Mark a lot higher on this list than where Mark currently sits. Mark is currently 7 on this list, and I would think out of the current users that are listed here, I would assume that Mark would be a lot higher. Having Oklahoma, I feel like I've seen him play with Oklahoma the first cycle and what he's capable with that team. They've got enough talent to compete with all the elite programs. Obviously there's a lot of talk around recruiting, and it sounds like uh, Colton stepping on toes when it comes to the recruiting side. So we'll see. But I think maybe Marks probably should be a lot higher. But again, that's of course if he gets around Colton. Virginia Tech, again, Young is probably one of the few users with a not really good team that can find his way into the playoffs. It really comes down to the game style that Young decides to play. Everybody knows when you play Young, you better have coffee, you better be awake, you better be in the mood to be concentrating for the entire game, because regardless if it's no huddle, RPOs, screens, he is throwing every single thing capable to move the football against you. So I'm not shocked to see Young on here. Another user that I thought was maybe a little low was Zay with TCU. It's funny because you could look at TCU and think of them as an underdog by team. Zay's just a really good user. Um, so him being on here is not really a shock to me. Nav with Notre Dame. I think Nav's 1-1 up to this point, so not having the greatest start to this, or 1-2, sorry. Not having the greatest start, but of course we still get into those conference games that'll tell the story. And the thing with DMAC with Clemson, I think this game is kind of playing towards what DMAC wants to do. That's just my opinion. I think it's playing towards what DMAC wants to do. Uh, it's funny. Clemson is a 3.5 star on this game. I don't know how. I really think they should be a 4 star, regardless of the season they had last season. Again, DMAX had a good start, but I do think conference-wise, the competitiveness of the conference, we still are way too early. I don't think how GA Bound started the season with Georgia will be how GA Bound ends this season with Georgia within our conference. And then, of course, the last one is Smitty with UCLA. Um, Not a shocker. I don't know exactly when Legend posted the predictions as far as to date. Um, I think it was the 9th when he made that list, and so obviously Smitty had a game, maybe a game or two up to that point. Smitty's figured out what is necessary to be competitive with UCLA. He does have to play Ohio State. I think he still has T-Raw in his schedule right after, if I'm not mistaken. He's got some big games left conference-wise. And so we'll see. But so far, he's figured something out, which is kind of funny because we're going to discuss that here in just a second. And then, of course, you have, up to this point, we have already seen upsets. We've already seen upsets take place in the league. Some of them, be very honest, I didn't expect. I actually told one user that if I was playing parlays, I would have lost some money to start the year. But speaking of predictions, getting destroyed, because I do think that's what we're about to see over time. I'm gonna start with the biggest one. Penn State starts the season beating Georgia. J Stack goes to Georgia. He gets up big in that game to start. I think it was like 35-7 or something to start the game. The game didn't finish that way. I think he ends up winning the game by 3 scores, 2 or 3 scores. Um, but he does take down Georgia, but then loses the very next week in a close game to LSU, and then of course UCLA. So, Penn State's got to try to figure out how to hold his spot for J Stack. And then again, talking about Smitty, he beat Miami. I think he played Washington, if I'm not mistaken. He beats Penn State. Obviously, if you look at stats, you should have a pretty good idea of what Smitty's doing up to this point. And I'll give Smitty some credit. He has always adapted his game to each new game that has came out since I've known the guy. Whatever the new thing is, he just adjusts to it, balance it out with his weaknesses, and just goes from there. Not shocking that he's starting off the way he is. To me, TCU beating Indiana, beating T-Raw, to me was an upset. I do think Indiana's just a better team. T-Raw is capable, a capable user, obviously a user that's won natties in the league. So Zay getting that win over TCU was definitely huge. And then, one game, probably the lowest scoring game that we will see, I would imagine the entire disc. Bird beats Nav 7-3. You know what's crazy? When I first saw that in the chat, I almost thought that was just a forced win because I thought 7-3, like that doesn't even feel possible on this game to have a game that's so low scoring of a 7-3 score. No, that game legit happened. Like I remember seeing the first quarter of the game and just kind of turning it off, obviously being on vacation. But Bird winning 7-3, that's just a crazy win to me. And then right after, here comes Texas Tech. Here comes Isaiah beating Nav again. So far the Nav that I expected with Notre Dame up to this point. This game has changed. I'm not really a fan of helping people figure out the game play, but the game has changed, and I've said this. I don't know for how long I've been throwing this out when it comes to gameplay, but I feel like NCAA, just like Madden, always tells a story. I just feel like it always tells a story, and Smitty is pretty much telling that story. Um, he's not gonna like this, but Smitty gets a segment today. He's running wild right now. Through 4 games, he's about to have damn near 1,000 yards rushing. Like, who the hell's gonna stop Smitty in this run game? He has figured something out with Wayne Knight. Gonna have one last season with him, but Smitty is setting the pace on the ground. I love seeing people establish the run game where everybody wants to throw the football on this game, to run the game. So I don't know if that's going to be the new trend that we see in league play, where we're going to see a lot of high rushing. Obviously, the carries are a lot higher than most, but maybe the run game is going to be the new thing in league play, but we'll see. Um, and then again, just wanted to kind of throw a last segment out there because I've seen the conversation kind of back and forth about macros and are they good for the game. I think every tool that comes to the game is good dependent on how you use it and when you use it. I'm probably not the best. I'm not one of the best users in here to really discuss how someone should play. That's something that I've always um, I just don't really lean on that. Which, if you know me, I don't really give you respect for being great until I see you play with a bad team. That's that's just me. Everyone else can feel the way they feel, but until I see you dominate with a team that is subpar or ass, to me, you're just a user playing with a great team and moving the ball forward. But I've seen the debate. It hasn't been a full debate. Obviously, people have wanted the cooldowns or play limits, all these things taken away from the play, from the gameplay. And it really just comes down to, our macros actually a good thing for EA football? Well, I mean, I don't know. If the game allows certain adjustments, some people believe there shouldn't be anything wrong with making those adjustments easier and faster. You're still responsible for calling the right defense. It's no difference than being responsible for calling the right offense. So you're still responsible for making plays. I think the decision on macros, the decision on how you call plays is truly determined by the game's play or style you want. Some guys are very conservative defensively, some people are extremely aggressive defensively. Um, if one player has to manually make, I don't know, it's just like 5 or 6 adjustments before the snap, while another player can trigger the same sequence almost instantly. Would you say those two users really play under the same conditions? And I think that's where leagues have to be careful. I'm gonna say users have to be careful because you can't. You got to be able to recognize the formation. Can you make adjustments? Can you get everything set before your opponent snaps the football? I mean, that's still a skill. If macros remove that skill completely, I understand why some players would consider it to be an unfair advantage. Um, I don't think it's an advantage or disadvantage with macros personally. But I'm curious what people think about it when it comes to the macro system in the league. Um, but again, just wanted to get a show out. We are still pretty early in the season. Man, thank you guys for getting joined, even though it took y'all forever to pick a damn team. Shit. But I do thank you guys for joining the league and getting set up so we're able to kind of get this thing rolling. Again, want to throw that apology out there for how we started. It was not our intent. Man, schedules just got full, and pretty much everyone's schedule kind of took over from a gameplay standpoint. And sometimes that's just how things happen. But I hope you all have a good rest of your day. And man, I do appreciate again, just for the energy in the chat, man. One thing I can say about this group is, you know, we have not had a bunch of crazy BS in the chat up to this point. I mean, hell, I don't think I've gotten too many complaints up to this point, despite how we started. So sounds like we're all on the right track together. But I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Looking forward to connecting with everybody in the chat and making sure that we are still staying solid and moving forward as a structured space with LOC. Man, y'all have a good day. Peace.